Hey, welcome everybody this morning to Talking Niagara with myself, Peter Giblett, and him, Dave Wheeler. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody out there. And on Talking Niagara, here we are, the award-winning show. Here's our reward. You have to use your imagination. It is. I haven't made one yet, but until that time, use your imagination and think a gigantic trophy.
What, like the Stanley Cup?
Yeah, but only bigger.
Isn't that one of the biggest trophies in sports?
It probably is because every year it's layered on another layer. The original monk came from Lord Stanley, and the same guy that made Stanley Park in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And then year after year after year, they put down. They would add silver rings to it to identify the winner every year, and a new ring and a new ring, and the rings just kept being wider and wider in the
Yeah.
base.
But things like, for example, the FA Cup hasn't grown, even though there are new winners every year. What they
Yeah,
do.
wait a minute. I haven't finished. They put the names of every player and those
Ah,
associated with the coach and the owners on the cup.
on the actual new ring that goes on the
Yeah.
bottom.
So
Yeah.
that's what adds so much room to it. They
Yeah.
started that in the early days because, of course, they didn't think that would add up that much, but it just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And
Yeah.
as years go on, I mean, that as every successive Stanley Cup winner gets on that cup, when every name of every player gets stamped on that cup, it just grows. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, at one time it was only given to one particular silversmith in Montreal to do that. I don't think that happens anymore because
Oh, you can't do that. You can't dictate that nowadays. No,
no,
because obviously a team that wins it in Carolina is not going to go to Montreal to get it fixed, are they?
no, the cup goes into a certain place where it's taken care of all at all times. So they do hire silversmiths to stamp the names of all the different players in there. But the original one that had took care of it for I don't know how many years,
Mm.
50 years or so, that
Hey,
old guy
can't
is,
we? Anyway, we kind of just need it to be CD size now, eh?
yeah,
CD size award, yeah.
yeah. Now I'm glad Mike's on there because what I want to do is read off what Mike sent us. I thought it was
Oh, good.
really
Yeah.
interesting. We've talked about the last week. We talked about the lands in the old GM building or GM property in St. Catharines, and and it was originally slated for residential, but they can't do that because of the pollutants in it, and of course the pollution that Mike has revealed in the creek that empties into the Welland River or the Chippewa Creek through the industrial area in uh, in Niagara, there in the south part of Niagara, close to Chippewa. So I just like to read off what he has sent, and I think this is important. It'll take a little while, but please do have patience. It's very informative. So Mike says this. He says the city of St. Catharines has ordered to release all documentation detailing the toxic substances beneath the former General Motors site on Ontario Street, where the developers have planned to build residential units without disclosing the potential health risks to the future residents. This is Mike. I was just at a meeting on the PCBs along Lions Creek East. There were representatives from the federal and provincial governments, the NPCA, and others. It was a great presentation. They had a PCB spill in the 1990s, and upon further investigation, there was a large amount of PCB spilt there long ago. During the presentation, the question period It was asked about who is paying and anyone fined. The answer is odd. The MECP said, that's the Ministry of Environment, said they operate on polluter pay principle, that they do not know who put the PCBs there before, so it has to be on taxpayers' dime. We need to address a couple of things here. An overview of the polluter's pay principle. The polluter's pay principle, PPP, in Canada is a tenet of the environmental law that holds polluters responsible for the cost of actions. Cleanup. The polluter is responsible for all costs associated with cleaning up spills, including equipment, contractors, staff time, and any costs incurred by the province. Compensation. The polluter is responsible for compensating those who have sustained damage, including municipalities, indigenous governing bodies, and landowners. Responsibility. The polluter is responsible for their actions, even if a spill isn't their fault. The PPP is enshrined in the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, CEPA, of 1999. However, the application of the PPP varies widely from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Canada Energy Regulator, CER, enforces the PPP for pipeline spills, spill cost recovery regulation, outlines the process for recovering costs for responding to spills. Provincial and territorial environmental protection acts, only 2 of Canada's 13 subnational jurisdictions have directly incorporated the PPP into their keystone environmental acts. Some challenges with the PPP include it can be difficult to precisely measure emissions. It can be difficult to decide the appropriate level of acceptable pollution. It can be difficult to decide the method to correct pollution. The MECP and the Federal Canadian Ministry of Environment, run by the polluter the polluter pays principle, why we allow corporations to pollute and walk away, then build on the contaminated sites. Just after meeting on Lions Creek, there is a story in the Pointer on the city of St. Catharines has been ordered to release all documentation detailing the toxic substances beneath the former General Motors site on Ontario Street, where developers have planned to build residential units without disclosing the potential health risks to future residents. One has to ask why we are not concerned with the cyanamide site the same way. You all know this is a hazardous area where people should not live. The old YMCA, where you allowed housing, has anyone ever asked the people that live there how they are feeling? Without disclosing the potential health risks to the future residents, this is a most important statement. The health impacts of living on these contaminated sites will cost us lives and huge amounts of money in healthcare. The savings of the cleaning up of a contaminated site and then building upon it is so huge, it far supersedes any profits from real estate. The savings in a huge list of health problems and diseases caused by living on and near contaminated sites will impact many things in the future. All genetic disease is environmental first. I can think of 2 factories today which have left huge environmental disasters that we are trying to build on without cleanup. In Niagara Falls, we have built on this site. GM in St. Catharines and the Cyanamide 4th Avenue property. Now in Niagara Falls, we have already built and placed people on contaminated property, also continuing to build and explore. Here is the problem. If we use the polluter's pay principle, why we are we not making these corporations clean up their sites? Then they still have factories in the area. GM has not left, neither has SciTech. We know we have built on many other contaminated sites and also ignore it. Why are we not using the polluter pay principle on every place to find contamination? One view of Lions Creek: polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, were first detected in Lions Creek in 1990 after a transformer spill occurred at the Hydro One Crowland substation in Lions Creek west of the Welland Canal bypass. During the cleanup, the presence of the older PCB contamination was detected, and this led to an assessment of the contaminated sediments in Lions Creek east of the Welland Canal bypass. In 1987, Canada and the United States signed a revised Great Lakes Quality Agreement, the GLWQA, in which Annex 2 describes remedial action plans, RAPS, which that are required to address environmental degradation in specific areas around the Great Lakes Basin. The GLWQA identified 43 areas of concern, AOCs, and recommended that RAPs be developed at local level and including public participation. The Niagara River is a binational AOC where two RAPs are under development separately, one in Ontario and the other in New York State. In 1999, the Ministry of Environment Canada and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority entered into the Memorandum of the Understanding, which under the CPCA assumed the role of coordinator of the Niagara River RAP. In order to complete the actions required under the Canada-Ontario Agreement, COA, pardon me, a lot of initials here, implement the Niagara River RAP and achieve AOC delisting and the contaminated sediment issues in AOC needed to be resolved. The RAP Stage 1 document identified three categories: level 1, 2, and 3 of the contaminated sediment in 14 locations in Niagara River AOC. In 2004, a Niagara River Contaminated Sediment Technical Advisory Group, TAG, was formed to review the comment on the studies being completed in the contaminated sediment sites for TAG. Lions Creek East was identified for further assessment in the Niagara Remedial Action Plan, that's the RAP, because contaminants at the sediment exceeded guidelines. The remediation of the PCB contaminated sediment and soil in Lions Creek West is currently being evaluated, and risk assessment of the other 11 sites determined that they did not warrant further management. Studies were undertaken to determine if there were a risk of PCB contaminated sediment in Lions Creek East to local fish, wildlife, human health. As a result of the studies and input of the community upon open house, it was concluded that there is a low level of risk to human and ecological health associated with the contaminated sediment, and the removal was not warranted. Since the sediment of interest is situated within the provincially significant wetland, it was determined that removal would actually do more environmental harm than good. So this is from 1990, there was knowledge of the PCBs, and they were not going to address this for another couple of years due to testing research. This is a small example of why there are so many sick people in the area. They were praising the people that own the property along Lions Creek for their help in research. Have they asked about health impacts of the families that live along here, since it is in their backyard? From 1900 until 1990 until now, they have been monitoring the environment and found that the environment was not getting rid of the PCBs naturally. PCBs are were used to make industrial products such as coolants and electrical components until they were banned in the 1980s. They were popular because of their insulation properties, non-flammability, and resistance to thermal and biological degradation, but that results in persistence, and once released in the environment, these pollutants can remain in the soil, water, and air for decades or longer. Resistance to thermal biological degradation, this common knowledge, yet we wanted from 1990 till now to make a move. I applaud the fact that they are going to clean up the PCBs in Lions Creek East. I feel they know Ontario Hydro did this. Why not have them help with the cost? I applaud the fact that they are going to divulge what is under the General Motors property in St. Catharines. Now, this is the last paragraph. When we truly use the polluter pay principle to go after polluters to pay for the cleanups of properties they contaminated, to protect the health of the people, if your environment is contaminated, you are as well. Your children are. Everything genetic is environmental first. We must start to change the insane rush to build housing on or near contaminated sites and break the chain of genetic disease. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much. That was incredibly incredible.
And we've got a thank you from Randy West. Outstanding coverage, Mike. What is a concern to the polluter pays is that I believe that both lands at GM and St. Catharines and Sianmid in the Falls were donated free of cost to their respective cities, making the cities responsible for the cleanup. As far as the Welland River, there are so many areas where dumping was commonplace that now that how to determine who is responsible for what becomes the issue. Either way, we ought to be cleaning up around us at any cost. Yes, 100%, Randy.
Yes, indeed. And well, thanks, Mike. That was an incredible amount of work you put in there. Really a huge amount of work, and we appreciate it very much.
I think everybody in this show appreciates the stuff that Mike does. And he puts a lot of effort out there, and he's not a person who just puts these things out willy-nilly. He does a lot of research into it. So Mike says thank you, by the way.
Yes, well, we also thank him, of course. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on that?
No, I just that gives you a very good update on, and in its conclusion, of course, is the most poignant part. Why are we rushed to put residential places on contaminated land, particularly when we are not even sure of the level of contamination? Like the Sianmid property is, really sticks out. Like there are contaminants there. Obviously, there's been a chemical producing place there for many, many years, and they've dumped all over that property. And yet, for some reason, we just can't get a bunch of bulldozers in and take off that layer of topsoil and the remnants there and take them away. Why can't we do that? This, as he said, SciTech and Sianmid still exist in the area, so they are supposed to be responsible for that cleanup. Yeah. And the hydro thing, they're in the area. Why aren't they responsible for the Lions Creek cleanup of the PCBs? Yeah. That's the polluter pays principle, and yet it's not being employed. So those are two factors there. Why are we do need a lot of residential property, but why put it on contaminated land before you understand completely the contaminations or have cleaned them up? And of course, the polluter pay principle isn't working that well, is it? Obviously. No. Has anyone come after hydro for the PCBs?
Well, the irony here, of course, is hydro being a public authority means that we end up having to pay for it anyway.
Yeah, but in a sense, you're right. But it's a public authority, but it has one major stockholder. That's the provincial government.
Yeah.
I think they've loosened the strings on that a little bit, but it has basically one stockholder. So it's technically it's an autonomous unit, private.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying they
In
shouldn't
reality,
pay. I'm just saying we end up paying.
yeah, because we'd end up paying
Yeah.
for the cost that they use to
Yeah.
clean up, and that's probably part of it too. If you go after SciTech to clean up cyanamide, it might go. They can make the argument, well, that will cost our product more, and it will hurt our bottom line, and it will cost you jobs because we'll have to lay off people. That's the kind of thing they say. In Stelco, for instance, I was just my buddy was a foreman there for over 30 years, and he said he had to report the pollution events that they happened there. Well, they would have accidents all the time, and stuff would go into the water or the air. He had to report it, and when he reported it, that was that. They came up with some sort of idea what they can and can't do about that. Like, for instance, if they had a spill in the bay or something like that of oil, they would have to throw out the booms, like the absorbent booms and stuff like that. But if they had a dump in water that was water soluble, it just stayed there. There's nothing much they could do, but they had to report it to them.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly. That's the problem. You see, when you've got oil, you can put a boom out and you can probably tidy up most of it, right? But some of these other pollutants, you don't even know where they are, right?
Yeah. It's like dumping. It's like dumping salt. Like, for instance, if you were a salt producer and you had an accident and you dumped a lot of salt into the water, well, of course that's a pollutant there and it's going to kill fish because it doesn't belong there, but it would instantly dissolve into the water. So there's no way of extracting it back out.
Right.
That's just a simple example.
Right. Mike basically adds, have you ever heard of the Superfund in New Jersey? It's a huge contaminated site created by cyanamide. Legal fees are still required in order to prove who is responsible. Legal fees can and likely will be more than the cost of the cleanups. True. Possibly without any success in pointing fingers. That's always possible, Randy.
Yeah. Now they have that duo. Remember, there was a lot of ignorance in the very beginning. I mean, I'm sure there was when cyanamide was created and all these other.
Well, I was watching I was watching a documentary about 3 Mile Island a while back, and it's like, in a way you can tell the issue there because you can wave a Geiger counter around and count the number, the parts per million in terms of the poison in the air, right?
Oh yeah, I like Chernobyl too. As a matter of fact, we've got an article coming up about that.
Yeah.
We probably won't get to it today, but yeah. So that's that's the thing. Yeah, you can wave a Geiger counter around and determine the level of exposure.
Although some people will claim that's invisible because of the fact that it takes an instrument, quite a high-tech instrument. A Geiger counter is.
Yeah, but you just don't want to go around there.
Yeah. It's just that this whole thing, 3 Mile Island, for example, I'm not so sure you'd even want to be living there within 5 miles of that place right now.
I don't know. I'm not so sure that it is. Well, it's nowhere near what Chernobyl is. They've got a 30 kilometer radius around the whole place where nobody's allowed to live. Although wildlife seems to have adapted. As a matter of fact, I think we had on our Science Friday, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, we talked about the wolves and the other wildlife that has returned to that area around Chernobyl and have found ways of adapting to the radiation. They are actually uh, uh, Darwinianism, basically, evolution has found ways of recreating the different animals there that are more resistant to that kind of contamination, which was a very
But
big surprise to everyone.
but we still haven't got three-eyed deer in the area.
No, no.
As Matt Groening kind of predicted. I mean, that's what happened when one episode when when Homer Simpson set off the China syndrome.
Well, yeah, I think what happens is with the radiation, you'll die of cancer. But in the lower levels, the animals that are around the outside build up tolerances, and their bodies, due to the evolutionary forces that Darwin first made popular or made clear, they even were able to adapt to higher levels of radiation. So the weak ones,
I think we are able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, those who had the mutations to take over. Hi, Chris.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah. And Becky's saying they don't care about the land, the air we breathe, but they will dig for all the royalties. Yeah, but you see, rich people have to live on the same land as we do.
No, they don't. They wouldn't. They wouldn't live there. They go to the clean spots. You know. They collect the rent from the poor people. Derating. It'll have to be electronic too, because they don't want to go and pick up cash because it might be radioactive. So they have to insist on electronic transfers.
Well, we're talking about anything else about that one?
No, but we do have another article coming up, and we probably won't get to it today. But it's also about the new surge in nuclear power coming up.
Actually, we will, but there was something else I wanted to get to first.
Yeah, like I said, like it's already 7:30, so I don't know if we'll ever get to it today.
All right. Well, I wanted to cover Canada's rent is averaging a $21.52 in rent during October 24, which is actually down 1.2% year on year. So the first year-on-year decline in rent since July of 21 during COVID pandemic.
Now, why is this? Why is this? Because is it because we've built enough homes? No, but we have built a lot more homes than we normally would have. But that's not nearly enough for this. What's happening then? Is there a lot less houses being left empty? That kind of thing.
Well,
I don't know.
I said a while back. Yeah, this is an interesting view. They're not actually telling us why; they're just giving us the actual statistics here. But I said a while back that we will end up with a declining. That the rent has to go back down again because it's at unsustainable levels the way it was at the time, and essentially, what's driving the market is, of course, affordability for anybody. And basically, it's saying rental declines were mainly focused on the largest cities within Ontario and BC, as well as Calgary and Montreal. Many smaller, more affordable markets across the country continued to post strong increases in October, but those were outweighed by the declines in Toronto, and Vancouver and the like. So the average asking rent for all types of property was down 21.52. But if you wind the clock back till April of 21, the average was about 1680. back in that day for all types of property.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. When the immigration level is reduced, that will have a big effect too. Right now, our immigration level, both permanent residents, students, refugees, and temporary workers, are continue to put an extreme strain on our housing.
The 3 month change in interest is minus 2.2%. So in comparison, everything was up 4% in October a year ago. So the 3 month average October a year ago was up 4% in comparison to 3 months prior, whereas now it's down 2.2%. And essentially, it's been hovering or dropping for a few months now.
Yes. So I would say that it will continue to decline as immigration is reduced to more manageable levels. I believe that, and I don't know how long an effect that's going to be. It will take a certain amount of time before that has effect. I would say that a year after those laws come into an effect, that we should see a significant drop in rent, or at least sustain and not raises in rent right now, because you could rent your closet to three students basically if you wanted to. You could fill your basement with, so like, I know a person that went looking for houses and they had 7 South Asians living in the basement. Like, that was the guy who owned it was selling his house, but he had about 7 South Asian men living in the basement. That kind of thing will go away a little bit, and there'll be more properties available. So there's hope in the future for those people who are straining at the bit, who are just making an ends meet. So that's going to be something in the future, I believe. So the population will level off, and I actually even decline a bit in growth until things are caught up. And then you have people like Polyev, who still appear to be the next prime minister, will hook immigration to housing starts. One housing start, there's like a family, right? But not 2 families coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I get that. But also, some of the housing start, in fact, you could never deal with 100% of the housing starts going to newbies. You've got to end up with probably only about 70% going to newbies. You've got to think of the existing population who already don't. There isn't enough housing for them.
Well, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Our housing is particularly stupid because we haven't built homes. We've asked 500,000 people to come here as permanent residents, but we only built 200,000 homes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then if you add the residences, then if you add the students, the temporary residents, and refugees, and all other things, what are you going to do?
At the moment, by the way, studio rentals are averaging 1622. This is Canada-wide. 1 bedroom is 1903, 2 bedroom is 2292, and 3 bedrooms are 2673.
That's insane.
That's actually a lot closer than it used to be, a while back.
That's stupid. How are people supposed to live?
Yeah.
Paying that kind of coin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's what we found. We found in the soup kitchen. We find it in the Salvation Army. When you talk to them, you talk to other groups. What happens is people can afford a place to stay, but not afford to eat 3 squares a day. It's one or the other. I'm going to have my little apartment, and that's going to take most of my money that I have coming in. but I won't have a whole lot to eat.
I'm going to make myself. I'm going to make myself a soup that I'm going to add a carrot to every day, and that'll be my meal for the week.
Yeah. So and healthy food costs a lot, and of course we talked about the grow effort in their movable, what do you call it? Truck that goes around to nutrition deserts, basically.
Yeah.
around the cities, and tries to sell food at a more affordable rate, healthy food, because healthy food costs a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, so annual rent by property type in October 24. Studio apartments went up 7.4%. One bedrooms went down 0.1%. Two bed went up 1%, and three bed went up 7.5%. But if you look at condos, condo rental, studios were down 6.9%. One beds were down 3.3% in price. Two beds were down 4% in price, and the three beds have only gone up 2.8%. So
Still,
condos, the prices, I think the prices in condos were much higher on average than the prices in just normal apartments.
I don't know, but anyway, it's kind of got good news. Things are going down, but haven't gone down far enough, and that is really a striking feature, the decline of the middle class.
I predicted about a year or so ago when we were, and maybe 2 years ago when we were talking at one point with Marie Recruit, I predicted that we will actually see a drop in prices. She believed that we wouldn't, and that's turning out to be the case, that we are seeing a drop in prices.
Well, it will happen eventually because it was inflated. So I think what Marie meant was you're not going to see a significant decline in property values.
No, I didn't expect it was going to be back to 90, so to 2017 levels or anything like that. I agree.
I think the only thing that might have slowed down is the increase of the value of real estate. So it might level off, but it's not going to decline. There were times where real estate did decline in the early 90s and that, but that's pretty rare. For the most part, real estate goes up in a steady angle. The problem with the real estate, as we said before, is not going up on an angle. It's going up in a peak.
Yeah.
And that sort of was leveled off. So I think what has to happen, if it can level off long enough, then maybe the average person can catch up to it, to at least part of it, and then thereby have housing much less of their initial costs.
And of course, what they're talking about here, the statistics are based upon average listed rent within each province per unit type. So they're picking up rental prices, looking at things like rentals.ca and other listing sites.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we got a bunch of comments upon that one. Okay. Right. My rent increase received $27, but my sink needs fixing. Been for 3 years. Yeah, Betty. It's the landlord's responsibility to fix the sink. Go get some legal advice. All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Betty, I see you've got a monster of a dog there. It'll probably protect you against the mouse.
Yeah. And she says, I don't mind paying rent, but when something needs fixing or painting, please do it. Yeah. Okay. Dare I say this, Betty, give us a call, 905-688-5598. All right. Wow. And how much things are how much is a check bi-weekly? Yeah. Okay. I see people talking about $250 that Trudeau's offering. Only some of his friends. Yeah, well, that's $250. We haven't even talked about that. It's going to be a long while before we get it. It's going to be in February, apparently.
Well, I don't know when Doug Ford's $200 is coming. I do know that Trudeau made his $250 because Ford made his 200.
Right.
Who's
Chosen
better
the
than
route.
you?
I can afford to be happy, please. Pierre did say they will stay at 1 million. I don't know who can afford a home or pay till you're 80. Yeah.
Yeah, as we've seen, we're going to have to, as our standard of living declines, we're going to be more and more dependent on public facilities for everyone, like more parks, more libraries, more easy to access gyms and places like that that are inexpensive
Well,
to the public.
that probably is one of the things that makes condos more attractive is that you can rent a smaller space that you actually need. But if you ever need to, like, for example, if you're having friends over for dinner, you can rent the room out inexpensively to to have them over for dinner at the main room without them impacting your condo. Right. Randy says everyone jumps at what can solve their particular emergency, but sooner or later relationships and living conditions change, and those who are overextended have to come back in line as unaffordable. Yeah.
There you have it.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to what you were talking about, nuclear power is hot right now. No, I picked up on that, and I thought, well, if we can talk about it, let's talk about it, right?
Well, yes, I did. Yeah, basically, nuclear power is being revived. What happened with nuclear power, and you mentioned 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, and then later on Fukushima.
Fukushima Daihatsu, yeah.
They those are things that were accidents that put a lot of fear into people. What was happening prior to those accidents was a march towards more and more nuclear power. Those particular accidents stifled nuclear power, and it also stifled a lot of research into nuclear power because the prospects of making profits out of that kind of research kind of cooled right down. However, that's turned around now. We do know that France never did really pay much attention to those things, and 70% of its power comes from nuclear power. So they have planned very carefully in nuclear. But what's happening in the United States, Canada, and the West, all in all, is a big interest in nuclear facilities. They're going to expand quite a bit in the United States. They are here as well. Because where else are you going to get the amount of power you need?
Yeah.
We do have a lot of fossil fuel. We have all kinds of it. We have 300 years of coal that we could use, but we don't want to use that for obvious reasons. Like that's become very clear that it will damage our climate, and we don't want that. So the other thing is, where are you going to get that amount of power?
And the US has announced that it's going to be tripling its nuclear capacity by 2050. And this is supported by people like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, who are looking for, they're claiming they're looking for tapping nuclear power to support their hungry AI services. I don't agree they're hungry. Most computers are actually low power compared to other things.
Well, no. As you know about Bitcoin, in order there's being pushed for more and more Bitcoin as a currency. That takes enormous amounts of power, unbelievable amounts of power to maintain the computers that are required to make Bitcoin a sustainable currency. And AI too, the demands of AI will increase rapidly, more and more, and they have to use supercomputers, and those supercomputers have to be cooled with fans. Not only do you need to supply the power to the supercomputers, but you also have to supply fans and things that keep them cool because they generate incredible amounts of heat.
Actually, some of the supercomputers are actually water cooled.
Yeah, and in places like I think places like Norway or something, they have the supercomputers deep within the ground, where the temperatures in the very cold areas of Norway or other places, I believe it was Norway, put theirs or Iceland or something, put theirs very deep in tunnels that remain cool all the time, so they don't have to add a whole lot of artificial cooling. They can just take the cooling that is there naturally in the bedrock, that it maintains this kind of like down in the rock permafrost, basically. So these are things that are required, plus the amount of the demand. The demand is going to be incredible for AI. So what do we need? We need power. We need sources of power.
Yeah.
Our sources of power are very limited. We can have hydro, and we pretty much use most of the major water facilities to make hydropower in Canada, and there are other places in the world that are doing the best. Now that has environmental consequences.
Well, we've been using in Canada here. We've been using hydro for a long time, right? We're probably one of the most advanced hydro, applications in the world. We probably use it more so than most other nations, maybe except for China.
Well, no, China still uses mostly coal, despite the fact of the Three Gorges Dam.
I was going to say the Three Gorges Dam is the biggest dam in the world that should be massive, making massive production on hydro.
Yeah, but still, right now, they still need their coal burning plants because that can't make up enough to take the coal burning plants offline. Agreed about it. Yeah, it makes an incredible amount of power, and of course, it will help reduce the amount of carbon coming out of China. But still, they are full of coal-based units, and as a matter of fact, Australia makes much of its money shipping coal to China. So that's not going to go away anytime soon. So more nukes have to be built. Now, this is not going to after Fukushima, Germany decided to close down its nukes. It feared that they were going to be a problem. That seems to be rather short-sighted, because what happens then is they have to burn natural gas or coal to make power.
Well, that's the influence. That's the influence upon the Greens on you. Greens have gotten into mainstream politics in Germany.
Well, if the Greens don't like nukes and they don't like coal and they don't like oil, and what do they like? The only other alternative I see is massive geothermal projects, which will cost an insane amount of money.
Well, the problem
there forever, but that is, yeah. What else do you have? What other alternatives?
Geothermal works for the future. Geothermal, if you're building new homes, etc., that's a great implementation. But for us, for the vast majority of older homes, they're way too expensive to get geothermal.
So right now, there's been a push towards getting heat pumps and other electrical devices to generate your heating and cooling. Of course, your cooling is entirely, for the most people, electrical through their air conditioning. But the heat, of course, most of us use natural gas. I use electric here, but it's costly. If you're going to push people into using less carbon producing means by which to heat your home, what do? You have to push them towards electricity. And how do you do that? You have to build more electrical plants. And unfortunately, to build more electrical plants, the only way you can do that right now is to build nukes. And Ontario's fixing up its old nukes and going to be adding new ones all over the United States. So the nuke is the way to go. But the drawback of nukes is only a stopgap situation anyway. There is only X amount of uranium-rich ore in the world. We're lucky here in Canada. We have all kinds of it in Saskatchewan. We have maybe the world's largest reserves of uranium in Saskatchewan and other places in Canada. However, it is estimated that if everybody went to nuke, you've only, like, say every major country went to nuke as their primary producer of energy, you'd only have 25 years of uranium. So there has to be, that's a stopgap. So there has to be the next evolution. And whether that's fusion reactors or geothermal, or I envision that somehow they're going to be able to capture the carbon. If some people are going to devise ways in which to capture carbon from fossil fuels, but that's all very expensive.
Well, so China has more than doubled its nuclear capacity. But one of the things I fear about something like China is exactly the same basic issue that we had in Russia in Chernobyl, right? In what was that, 83, yeah? 83 when Chernobyl happened. Sorry, 85 when Chernobyl happened. It's the same basic issue as about that if something goes wrong, the CCP will cover it up.
Yeah, they will, but they will. They've learned by the mistakes of others. The biggest problem I see is, like, Japan built its Fukushima.
Fukushima was built on the wrong side of the island.
Well, the whole thing with Fukushima would have been fine if they took the motors and put them up higher. Nothing would have happened. As a matter of fact, when they built it to be able to take on huge magnitudes of earthquakes. So they did everything right except where they placed the motors. In other words, if there was an earthquake, it would easily survive it. But if there was a tsunami, no one thought about the electrical motors that are required to keep the place cool being flooded by a tsunami.
Yeah.
The Dutch did. The Dutch had actually gone there and had told Japanese that those motors were at risk from a tsunami, but it was shrugged off. Oh, who's going to have a tsunami here? Well, that's what happened. Well, it's kind of like the towers. It's kind of like the Twin Towers. They put fire resistant materials on the girders, so if you had a fire, they weren't going to be affected by the fire. But they didn't, and of course they built it to be strong enough to be hit by an airplane, but they didn't think that the airplane hitting the building would strip the insulation off the beams and girders, and then they would be then exposed to heat and fail.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. Well, plus also the weight of the airplane that was still inside that building, of course.
That was marginal. It's made of aluminum. The whole thing was meant to take on.
But again, these were fully fueled jets that were coming in and smashed into that building that ignited it, basically.
Well, the problem was, as I said,
anyway,
they had engineered it to resist a fire. They had engineered it to resist a full bore impact from a jet airplane, but they didn't think the two things together. If a jet hits the building, the impact of that would strip that insulation, that fire resistance insulation, off the beams, and then it would be exposed to flames. So they didn't think of the third thing.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And it's no disrespect to the people who built that structure. It's just they didn't put that in their thought pattern when they built it, right?
Any case, Fukushima was the same way. They put their motors at a risky location because that's probably the easiest place to put them. If they had elevated those motors, those pump motors, to 1 or 2 stories higher, we wouldn't have had this problem at all. We would never have talked about Fukushima. We would have just said how amazing it was that it survived a tsunami and an earthquake.
Yeah. Had those been up, Ed, you're right. All right. So Becky's saying China's dam set the earth on tilt. I'm not sure I've heard that one.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so.
We have many intelligent people to build and plan all this stuff. Yeah, we do. We do.
Yeah, Betty, that amount of water that China has backed up on the Three Gorges Dam, don't believe that rubbish about it making the world go on a tilt. It's not big enough. The moon has more of an effect on how we wobble out through space than and it's pretty far away than the Three Gorges Dam. That that's just and nor the Blue Nile Dam that is happening in Ethiopia right now. That's a huge one too. But you know that those are rather small things basically, and I don't know where these rumors start, but
Well,
it can't possibly have any
it's the
difference on
same
the
as
way the world moves.
yeah. It's the same as if we all at at 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, given it's 7:59, if we all stood up and walked west for 1 kilometer, it was that you know we would change the Earth's rotation. Again, nonsense, eh? If every one of us 9 billion people suddenly walked a kilometer west, we'd tilt the Earth. No,
Well, it's just like all of us facing east and yelling to England and say, "Do you hear us?" Well, no, it's not going to do anything, is it?
it isn't going to do anything. Yeah, or dig way down to China. Yeah.
So there is the theory of chaos where little effects multiply,
Yeah,
and
yeah. You know, a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazon causes a rainstorm in China.
yeah, very unlikely, but that's kind of an exaggerated effect of the theory of chaos. But it usually chaos happens when you have a predictable pattern of things happening all the time, and then one small different variable is added to it, and that
Yeah.
sequence continues for a while, but then suddenly changes to something radically
Oh
different.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's the whole principle of chaos theory. In fact, you add one small. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back statement, right? You know,
that
you
kind
can
of
add.
thing.
You know, straws are incredibly light, and you can add so many straws. It can carry 100,000 straws, but if you carry 100,001, it's dead,
Yeah, but it's not instant collapse.
and it's not.
Not
Yeah,
like
it's not.
that camel, it's keep getting more and more straws on it will start to fail, start to fail, and then finally there'll be that last piece of straw that just
Yeah,
overtakes it.
yeah.
But it's a little bit of difference there. Anyway,
Okay.
so the nukes that we're having that we're going to be building is inevitable, and I don't think Mike Cushman will be too happy about that because he's not happy about nukes. But I don't see any way out. If we are going to our number one critical threat to our way of life as we have it now is climate change. It's been
Well, when
affecting certain areas of the world very much. Not here very so much, but other areas of the world is being affected quite a bit by climate change.
one
And
of the
the predicted effects going forward doesn't look rosy. So we do have to come to terms with what we are doing to our air and how do we fix it. There's but as I said before, nuke is an answer, but only a stopgap answer.
one of the criticisms that happened about 3 Mile Island, if I recall correctly, was that there was a rush by they they did what they did to actually get and contain the accident. They did a lot more that to contain the accident to stop the worst happening than they did in Chernobyl. Absolutely 100%. But the criticism that has been drawn about 3 Mile Island is the fact they tried to go back online, tried to mainstream get back on the grid again. Too early a point. They were driven by that need to get that station back working again.
Yeah. Well, anyway, 3 Mile Island was minor compared to the other ones.
Oh yeah, 3 Mile Island was, but there was that drive, and one of the things they're talking about is that if we are utilizing additional nuclear power, one of the criticisms that came out of 3 Mile Island, and yes, it's small compared to Chernobyl and Fukushima and Daiichi, was the fact that certain people have stated that the profit motive was part of the problem with 3 Mile Island.
Well, sure, shortcuts like the China Syndrome is a perfect movie to exemplify that.
And that actually came out about a month beforehand.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the China, and this was what happens when corruption is involved. Nuclear sites are extremely expensive to build, extraordinarily expensive. So there will always be that temptation to cut corners, because if anything happens, it's going to be 20 years from now. So who will know that we did it, kind of thing. So there is that temptation in China, for instance. The temptation will be to tell the Communist Party what they want to hear, and that was the problem in the Soviet Union. Nobody wanted to tell the rulings authorities that things weren't as they should be. That's why everybody in agricultural reports from the different areas of the Soviet Union always inflated their harvest, because if they deflated it, they would be replaced. And they damn well knew that whoever replaced them would find the same problems, not be able to produce any more harvest, but lie about it. So everybody lied about it to keep their job. So that's what the problem with a communist government like that. However, the Chinese government is a little bit different. They have learned a lot from the failure of the Soviet Union, and and I don't think, if anything, they would build the best nuclear reactor, the most safest one in the world, just to show it off to the whole world. That's my thinking. But like I said, France has used nuclear power, 70% of its power since after the war, and it continues to do nuclear things, and it hasn't had an incident.
And the interesting thing is about this is that whenever they talk about nuclear power, nobody even seems to mention France.
I don't know why. France is a success story with nuclear. They haven't had any major accident at all with their nukes. They have nukes all over the country. Like I said, they're a pretty populous country that uses nukes for 70% of its need. And so they planned to have a nuclear power base, and because they didn't have resources of coal or oil or places where they could build hydro, so where else were they going to go, right? So
the only other choice they really had in France was wave power.
Yeah, and that's another reason why their problem is going to be where they're going to get the uranium, because Mauritania and Niger and places like that, where they used to have colonies, is the source by which they get their uranium or plutonium, and they're not welcome there anymore. But I suppose they still are welcome to buy the stuff, because those countries need that.
Yeah.
But the French, when they controlled the politics, their particular version of the CIA, when they messed with the politics of West Africa, like the United States messed with the politics of just about everywhere else, it was for oil initially, and then after that is probably more for uranium. And anyway, those are other stories. It's 8:07, so I think we should get lost here.
Thank you for keeping an eye on the time, Dave, because I had omitted to do that this morning.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. We're going to have to move on, because I have to get something going.
Me too. And but my job collecting the bingo cards is much less now. I've divided my route in two, and another guy's taking half of it. So
Oh, so I hope you're whipping him in one half and you're profiting on the other half. I hope.
well, look, we gave $5,000 to Sally Ann last week and $2,000 to the soup kitchen. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, and thank everybody for being here. And yeah, Dave.
Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Go Bernie Sanders.